Gary Parrish, welcome to the Eye on College Basketball podcast on CBS Sports Network, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me, and we're going to start with the most notable result from Monday night. It happened down in Lubbock. Number 4 Houston, 69. Number 10 Texas Tech, 61. So Kelvin Sampson's Cougars are now, if you're keeping track, 24-4 overall. They're 16-1 in the Big 12. They are Big 12 champions, at least co-champions, for the second straight year. They will soon likely be outright Big 12 champions for the second straight year. Norlander, as you know, this program made exactly one NCAA tournament in the 21 years before Kelvin Sampson was hired in April 2014. Had not won a conference championship, any conference championship, since 1992. Now, Kelvin Sampson has won 6 league titles in the past 7 years, including 2 straight in the Big 12. Feel free, my friend, to take it wherever you want, but I'm basically just asking you to praise Kelvin Sampson's brilliance. So, yeah, go ahead and do that.
Well, let's do it. In the context of this team, the reason why we should be even more excited about Houston now than the previous seasons, and I want to get to that in just a second, GP, is that this Cougars outfit enterprise has never been as good from 3-point range as it is this season. I talked to Kelvin Sampson a week ago for a thing on the Court Report that we talked about on a recent episode of the pod, and amid talking about his journey to Houston, what they've built, and we talked about it on previous shows, he did just get on to talking a little bit about how good they are from beyond the arc and how that's a real forte now, and it's backed up by the data. 40.2% as a team from 3-point range. That's his best ever at Houston. Within that, you've got Emmanuel Sharp, who's a 43% 3-point shooter. Milas Uzan, who had his best game of his career and hit the clincher, which really was emblematic of what Houston can be. Like, United Supermarkets Arena, which sounds even weird to say, but that's the name of it, was just, in full throat, 3-point game. Texas Tech is trying to come back and steal it away. 45 seconds to go. Uzan's got a borderline NBA range 3, cash, 6 points. That's it. Avenge the loss in Houston from a few weeks back and clinch at least a share, and in all likelihood, standalone eventual Big 12 regular season title. Uzan's 43% from deep. LJ Cryer's 41.5%. Even Terrence Arsenault shoots 37.9%. So that's big. It's led to also, with that hand in hand, the adjusted offensive ranking at KenPom right now is 7th in the country, 125.1. Also the best Kelvin Sampson has had. And oh, by the way, this is still a top 3 defense. So Houston continues to be just magnificently consistent. I'll get to more on that in just a second. But you take it where you want to go, GP. What are your takeaways on the game, what you saw, or the big picture stuff with the Cougars, who obviously have established themselves as one of the most reliable things in all of college sports?
Well, first, we should point out, before a Texas Tech fan does, that the Red Raiders were shorthanded at home. And even Kelvin Sampson, after the game, said, I think this comes with an asterisk. Like, listen, we've beaten some good teams. We are a good team. But we didn't beat Texas Tech at full strength. So that acknowledged, still going into that arena, as somebody who was in there just a few weeks ago, I'm telling you, it's terrific, a wonderful on-campus facility. And I know you watched the game last night, but among other things, Fran Fraschilla, who was on the call for ESPN, said it was the loudest building he had been in all season. So sure, Texas Tech was shorthanded, but that was still a hostile road environment. And for Houston to go in there and win it the way they did, I thought super impressive. Controlled it for much of the second half, and then Uzan knocks down that big 3 in rhythm. And I thought everything that happened, like in the final minute, or at least some of the stuff that happened in the final minute, was just perfect stuff to illustrate why Houston is where it's at right now. First off, the game-clinching shot was a 3-pointer, and they've been a good 3-point shooting team, great 3-point shooting team this season. Beyond that, there was a moment, and I don't even really know exactly what it was, but there's like 11-point-something seconds left. The game is over. And the cameras cut to Kelvin Sampson, and he is in Joseph Tugler's face, like furious about something, and just still coaching and holding his players to excellence. There are so many other coaches who in that moment would be breathing a sigh of relief. Like, we've been in a fight for 39 minutes and 50 seconds, and now I can breathe. It's over. We got this thing. We're Big 12 champs. Kelvin is still coaching as hard as he was coaching in the first minute, as hard as he would coach on a 6-game losing streak as opposed to a 6-game winning streak. It does not matter. He's just in the moment every single moment. And that's among the reasons he's been able to build this into one of the best, not just programs in the Big 12, but consistently one of the best in the country. Just some weird numbers. I mentioned they've won now 6 conference championships in the past 7 years. That's in 2 different leagues. And it would be 7 for 7, if not for the fact in 2021, where it was decided in the American Athletic Conference because of unbalanced schedules and COVID cancellations. Houston was the best team in that league that season, but Wichita State had a higher winning percentage in the conference with a different number of games played. And so they were technically the conference champs. But if not for that, it would be 7 conference championships in a row in 2 different leagues. And again, this is a program that hadn't won a conference championship before Kelvin got there since 1992. I sort of led the top 25 and 1 this morning by just sort of telling my own personal story. I was a Memphis beat writer for 4 full seasons, covering the Tigers in Conference USA while Houston was in there with them. And I didn't remember it this way, but I just went and looked it up earlier today. My 4 full seasons were 2002, 2003 through 2005, 2006. And in those 4 seasons, in Conference USA, Houston finished 11th, 13th, tied for 6th, and 4th. In Conference USA, every time I went to Hoffein's Pavilion, their outdated home at the time, I just remember it was dark, it was empty, and it was like, really? Phi Slamma Jamma? Like, this is where that happened on this campus? Because that program was dead. But they went out and hired somebody I believe is an all-time great coach at the collegiate level, somebody I do believe should be in the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame. And if you were discounting what he was doing while Houston was in the AAC, fine. But he took it into the Big 12 and took it straight to the top immediately, lost a first-team All-American in Jamal Shedd, and here he is again, about to win the league that has been considered for much of the past 2 decades the toughest league in the country. He's going to win it by multiple games for the second straight year, go 2 for 2. It's an amazing story.
Well, it's not just that, GP. I mean, remember, Shedd became a first-team All-American after Marcus Sasser was that level kind of player. And now, like, they have good players, but as of today, they don't have a first-team All-American. Could someone theoretically get there? Yeah. I mean, I think if Houston, as a reminder to anyone listening or watching on the show, we mention this periodically, we believe strongly in doing our All-American voting, and we wait until we get to the Final Four, before the Final Four is played, but after the Elite Eight. So allow the tournament to influence some, not entirely. I bring that up to say, if Houston makes the Final Four, in that situation, maybe they'll wind up having a first-team All-American, but almost certainly one of these guys is going to be a second-team All-American. But it's been a really good spread across the board with all of that. Now, here's what's interesting. I did some research this morning here. Right now, Houston is 3rd at KenPom. All right. And the past 3 seasons, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 2, meaning last year before that, Houston finished 2nd at KenPom every single season. It's 3 right now. If it just stays at 3 from here till the end of the season, that would be 4 consecutive seasons of top 3 finishes at KenPom. There's only trivia time. There's only one school that has ever done this, gone at least 4 seasons in a row, consecutively, top 2 finishes at KenPom. What school is it, GP?
Gonzaga.
It is Gonzaga. Bingo, bango, buddy. You are correct. From 2019 through 2022, so the 19, 20, 21, and 22 campaigns as those ended, Gonzaga was number 1 for 2 straight years and then number 2. The only other schools, period, if you want to expand this to what is probably an inevitability here, where Houston will have 4 straight seasons of top 5. So even if they can't hold on to 3 or 4, but they slip all the way down to 5, there's only 2 other schools that have done that. It's Villanova from 2015 to 2018. And then if you go to the Duke Blue Devils around the turn of the century here under Mike Krzyzewski, they were, if you want to make it top 6, it's insane. In 97, as far back as KenPom goes, Duke was 6. Then it went 6, 1, 1, 5, 1, 1, 6, 1, 3, 2. That is from 97 all the way to 06. Now, they didn't go 4 years in a row of top 3 because you had a couple of 6s and 5s in there. But that is an insane run of dominance for Duke from a metric standpoint. And, of course, they won a national championship, made some Final Fours in there as well. But that's the level that Houston is on right now. As consistent, I mean, really, if you want to truly box them off differently, they're the most consistent program or trending to be that right now in the modern era, because no one else has been able to be this good at the top of the sport for this long. So mighty impressive stuff from Kelvin Sampson's group. I do think, Parrish, I was looking at it last night. So Houston right now, it's home to Cincy on Saturday, 2-day turnaround, home to Kansas, see how that goes. And then they finish at a Baylor team, which could conceivably be playing to get into the tournament at that point, because Baylor is bubblicious right now. I think Houston's likely to go 3-0 and finish out the regular season. And with that in mind, I'm going to project Houston gets a 1 seed. It gets the final 1 seed, knowing full well that Duke, Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, these teams are also in the 1 seed conversation. Auburn is effectively locked up a 1 seed already, folks. But I think Houston will get there, because I think that Houston, which has 4 losses right now, if it takes the right loss to the right team, I think it can afford to get to 5 losses and still be a 1 seed. And I don't see how this team is going to lose more than 1 more game.
Yeah, I mean, they're 24-4 overall. They're 8-4 in quadrant 1. They are now, Houston, the only team in the country with at least 8 quadrant 1 wins and fewer than 5 total losses. They're the only team that can check that box other than top-ranked Auburn. I moved Houston up to number 3 in the top 25-1 on Tuesday morning. And you mentioned some of those great Duke teams and that great Duke run. Go back and look at all the NBA players that were a part of that. This thing at Houston, like, they lost Jamal Shead, and they did not replace them with an obvious first-team All-American or an obvious 5-star freshman. These are just guys who have been guys either at Houston or other places for the most part. And Kelvin has done with them the same thing he does with every single team he's had for 7 straight years now. He's molded them into one of the best basketball teams in the country, operating at an extremely high level. Again, after a span of 19 seasons where Kansas won 17 Big 12 championships in a 19-year run, as soon as Houston enters, that's over. Now Houston has won back-to-back Big 12 titles, and it's about to be back-to-back outright Big 12 titles, and probably by multiple games. When we come back, let's turn our attention to Gonzaga. The Zags return to the court tonight, and they're very bubbly, or at least moving in that direction after this weekend's loss to St. Mary's. Is that streak of NCAA tournament appearances, is it in jeopardy? I'm going to ask Norlander next. The Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. Gonzaga returns to the court tonight after Saturday's loss to St. Mary's. The Zags are at Santa Clara. That's not a gimme, and they're going to enter projected as a number 9 seed in Jerry Palm's latest bracket that's posted at CBSSports.com. Norlander, are the Zags, is that NCAA tournament streak that stretches back to the 1999 season, is that in jeopardy, or relax? They're going to be fine. They're always fine. We have this conversation every 3 years or so.
Well, I mean, we had it a year ago, about, a year and 10 days ago, because Gonzaga was looking like it was lacking a lot of heft on its resume. It played Kentucky, it won the game, and then I think it won out to wind up getting a 5 seed, maybe 4 or 5 last year in last year's tournament. If you're curious on the streak, to those watching and listening to what GP just referenced there, Kansas is going to continue it. It's made 34 in a row. It'll be 35 this year. Michigan State has made 26 in a row. It will be 27 this year. Gonzaga has made 25 in a row, but will it be 26? I'm going to predict it will be 26. I think but it's also entirely possible that Gonzaga, which has not faced GP, this is objectively true. We're at February 25 right now. Now, Gonzaga has had a few years where it's had some bubble type seasons, but to me, I don't think Gonzaga as a program has had games in the final week of February since Mark Few has been a coach with more pressure attached to those games. And it starts tonight against Santa Clara. Keep in mind, Santa Clara, it has had some success in 2 of the past 3 games against the Zags, winning those. There was a stretch here, credit our CBS Sports research team with this. There was a stretch where Santa Clara was mowed over by Gonzaga. It was 2-43. And then in the past 3 meetings, Santa Clara is actually 2-1 against Gonzaga. So if you're mathing up at home, Santa Clara has as many wins in its past 3 games against Gonzaga as it had in its previous 45. Game could be really compelling. Both these teams have had games this season, at least 10 where they hit 90. This could be a race to 90 tonight. But yeah, the resume is lacking. You mentioned Palm has them as a 9. They got to be probably the last 9. You know, our buddy Evan Miyakawa does a good job. He's got this thing called resume quality, which, to be clear, is not what the committee isn't using this, but he's trying to bring more information and perspective. And in Miyakawa's view, or the algorithm he built, he has Gonzaga out of the field. And if you really want to scrutinize the resume, I think you have a point. The 2 best wins are Baylor and San Diego State. Those teams are narrowly in the field, if in the field at all, particularly with San Diego State. Yeah, man, it's going to be fascinating because Santa Clara, already having gotten the win at Gonzaga earlier this season, it's going to come in really, really confident in this one. And it's trying to do tonight something that's only been done twice since Mark Few's been a head coach. Only this year's St. Mary's team and the 15-16 St. Mary's team. Those are the only teams since Few became a coach that have ever beaten Gonzaga twice in the regular season. Santa Clara would become the 3rd group if it could get done. And if it does get done, it would be the 2nd time this season that has happened because obviously St. Mary's has the sweep there. I think they'll get in, Parrish. I think you'll agree with me, but it feels very real that they miss it. I'd put it at, GP, I'd put it like, I love the general specific. I would say 58-42 split. Gonzaga is in the tournament, but I do not think this is like, oh, it's Gonzaga. They'll take care of it. They'll get it done. You lose one of these next 2 on the road, either Santa Clara or then San Francisco, both good teams. You're going to have to really do some damage in the WCC tournament.
Yeah, I'm with you. If I had to bet one way or the other, I would bet that they're going to be in the field. I would bet that on Selection Sunday, Adam Zucker tells us the Zags are in the field, that the streak remains intact. But, I'm not certain of it. You round your numbers to some, nice round numbers. You put it at 60-40. I think that's about right, because it's not only that they just have 2 quadrant 1 wins and they're only over Baylor and San Diego State, neither team that's ranked in the top 25 right now. It's that those 2 wins came in November. I mean, they haven't beaten anybody good in a long time. They're 0-6 in their past 6 quadrant 1 opportunities. They've got 8 total losses and no good wins since November. Now, if you want to focus on the good, or at least try to make it not so bad, or if you're trying to understand, frankly, why they're still very high at KenPom, very high in the net, they got 8 losses, but it's by a combined 34 points. They haven't lost a game by double digits all year, haven't lost a game by more than 8 points. The average margin of victory is only 4.3. So here's the truth. I don't think they're as bad as their resume suggests, but that won't matter much on Selection Sunday unless the resume improves or doesn't get much worse. Because even though the computer numbers are largely strong, they are 6-8 in the first 2 quadrants with only 2 quadrant 1 victories, and both of them coming in November. And you can miss on some of these opportunities if you're Auburn or an SEC school or a Big Ten school or a Big 12 school, where you might get 20 quadrant 1 opportunities in the regular season. Gonzaga's only going to end up with like half of that, and they've already missed on most of them. And that puts them in a situation where I didn't expect on February 25th to be talking about the Zags in this way. But here we are, and I don't know if they got work to do to make the field, but they can't lose many more times or else it's going to get real, real shaky.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they have work to do in terms of they're not in right now. I'd have them in 10 line, maybe 11. I could be convinced, but there is no profile like this. How about this? These are the metrics as of right now. So Gonzaga is 10 in the net. It's 10 in BPI. It's 11 at KenPom, and it's 14 at Torvik. Those are all predictive based metrics, how good we think Gonzaga is in the landscape of college basketball. But that doesn't tell you about the resume Gonzaga has played and how it's fared against it. that is a different story altogether. 40th in KPI, 48 in the NCAA's new wins above bubble metric, and 51 in strength of record. There isn't a team remotely like this. It is wild to see the massive discrepancy. And frankly, we rarely get something like this from a power conference, or let's call, a power conference adjacent program, which Gonzaga obviously is. If you scroll through the net rankings, the next school that kind of compares to this is Baylor, which is 30th, and Baylor played Gonzaga. It's not even helping the case in that instance. Fascinating resume. They can't afford to lose, in my opinion. Parrish, 3 losses and you're toast. 2 and it gets super dicey. No matter where the 2 come, win Santa Clara tonight, lose at San Francisco, lose in the title game to St. Mary's or something like that. Like, that's going to be real tricky if that's the case. I would advise Gonzaga to not lose, period. I think it's got room to lose 1. And if that happens, I don't know. We'll see. The idea that Gonzaga, by the way, I was talking over the weekend with some folks when I went to the games, Parrish. The idea like Gonzaga playing in Dayton in the first 4, it feels wrong. It feels weird. We're so used to Gonzaga being a 1 seed, a 2 seed, a 3 seed, a 4 seed, way more often than not. The idea that this team might actually be going to play in Dayton, maybe, we'll see. It's just an oddity. My brain had never even considered the possibility that Mark Few would have to, find his team flying to Southern Ohio to get a game in the tournament, but that's very much on the table.
Haven't missed the NCAA tournament since 1998. That's now in play. And then if they do get in, and again, we both think they will, but then the next streak is in jeopardy. They've made 9 straight Sweet 16s. Are you trying to extend that to 10? It doesn't look like they're going to be seeded in a way that is going to suggest that streak should continue. But as always, we'll see. Either way, here's what I can guarantee you. No matter what happens at Gonzaga the rest of the way, that job is not going to open unless Mark Few decides he just doesn't want to coach college basketball anymore. But there are 5 big jobs, or at least 5 high major jobs, that are open right now because Utah has announced that it is making a coaching change. Florida State, Indiana, Miami, Utah, Virginia, that's the list. I'm going to get Norlander to rank them. We'll do that next. This is the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. Obviously, March is about the madness, and we'll focus a lot on the actual basketball stuff as we roll into that month. But the coaching carousel is a big part of the conversation always, and we're already there. As of this moment, 5 high major jobs have opened, with Utah being the most recent one, opening earlier this week. So in alphabetical order, we got at Florida State, Indiana, Miami, Utah, and Virginia. Norlander, I know different things matter to different people, but if you were a candidate for these jobs, how do you think you'd rank them from best to worst?
Am I getting yours as well on this, GP?
Sure, I'll do it.
All right, good. Okay. Before I give you I'll give you my 5. Then I pulled a number of head coaches anonymously and asked them to separate the 2 that I have at the top. So I think it's really close. I'm taking into league situation, ease of entry, location of the job, fan base, where we think it's going to be, potential revenue sharing, all of that. I'm taking all of it into account. I narrowly have Indiana ahead of Virginia. I would go Indiana too, but I'm talking like narrow. I think Virginia's got a lot of promise, even in the post Tony Bennett era. The reason why I would actually have Indiana ahead of Virginia as an institution, because it's in the Big Ten and in revenue sharing and the amount that basketball matters there. I just think that the school will have more money to spread around to its talent on its roster. And I think that will matter. If that wasn't the case and we weren't on the precipice of a revenue sharing world and this is more about NIL, while Indiana still might have more ahead of it, and I'm not alone. I'll get to that in just a second. I go Miami 3. I go Miami pretty firmly 3, by the way. Now, fan support could be hit or miss. I understand the ACC has a lot of changeover in its coaching ranks. There's a lot of potential there. I go Utah 4, and then I go Florida State 5, based on, talking to essentially, since the start of the season. Like, Florida State doesn't seem to be prepared to invest in men's college basketball, which it could attract some of the candidates it might want. Doesn't mean it won't eventually get a good coach. Doesn't mean it won't get a coach that's going to wind up doing something and be good. I'm sharing this based off of what's been told to me. FSU monetarily, as of the last week of February, just isn't prepared to line up to completely invest in the way that I think some of the other schools on this list are. So I go Virginia, Florida State. Indiana, Virginia, Miami, Utah, Florida State.
If I were ranking those same schools, those same jobs, I would have a similar order. I would go definitely Indiana 1, definitely Florida State 5. I would have Virginia, Utah, and Miami in the middle. We can expand on that in a moment, but I think we're having some technical difficulties right now. So let's take a quick break, see if we can get that worked out. We'll be back. Eye on College Basketball Podcast, CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. Apologies for those technical difficulties. Hopefully they are behind us. We were discussing the 5 high major jobs that are open right now. And like Norlander said, I think we're in agreement on the order. Indiana, I think, certainly has to be 1. And I do, with all due respect, think Florida State would probably have to be 5 in these jobs. To be clear, I think I'd probably enjoy life better being the head coach at Virginia than the head coach at Indiana. But there's just so many advantages built into Indiana that if you can do the job well, you can really take it to the tip top of everything. The issue is if you're not doing the job as well as the fan base believes you should, it can get miserable very quickly, and the leash is incredibly short. But Indiana in the Big Ten, Indiana cares deeply about the sport of men's basketball. I think if everything is equal, you probably go in that direction. Let me stop here for a second and ask you this, because Matt Painter, the Purdue coach, the in-state rival to Indiana, was asked over the weekend, if he had any thoughts on the situation at Indiana. And he more or less lectured the Indiana fan base and said, like, you guys, I'm paraphrasing here, but more or less said, you guys need to chill a little bit, like support something through the good and the bad. I know not all Indiana fans took the commentary well, but I thought there was sensible stuff in there. What did you make of what Matt Painter said about the difficulty of being the Indiana coach?
Yeah, I thought a lot of what he said made a lot of sense. I completely understand why Indiana fans heard it and said, yeah, don't need to hear what the Purdue coach has to say about our job opening. He should, he might have a conflict of interest. He might not want the Indiana coach to do that well, all things considered. But you and I, knowing Painter, he was being honest. That was coming from the heart. And I think a lot of Indiana fans really could see that as well. And it gets tough, though. It gets tough because you get into the rhythms of these seasons and you have hopes and expectations. You've been waiting to have year-over-year consistency. It just doesn't happen. Under Mike Woodson, Indiana is a sub-500 team against ranked competition, and those amount of letdowns, like they pile up, and so angst builds. This is a proud program that, for the majority of Bob Knight's tenure, if you scan across from the day one he started to the last day when he was fired, like, Indiana was fairly one of the 10 most important, relevant, and successful programs in all of college basketball across, more than a quarter century. It has not been that since then. And Painter's words were, I think they will be taken to heart by people that, know, love, and appreciate basketball. And he also said, you do have a lot of those fans that are like this, but in the social media world where you see a whole bunch of folks that get online and they tag player accounts and official team accounts, like, some of that noise can become outsized versus what it actually is. And obviously, when you have people not showing up to games, you have students leaving during the end of the first half, you're actually seeing it in physical form, some of the rejection of all that stuff. So I thought that was intriguing. I will say I hit up like 11 or 12 coaches and just said, hey, listen, off record, blind poll, Indiana versus Virginia, interpret it how you see fit, but which job do you think is better? 8 of them have gotten back to me as of our taping here. It's 5-3 for Indiana. one coach, and these are all head coaches, many of them at the power conference level, a couple of them a level below, but with experience there. One said Virginia, because of the identity, they know who they are. Indiana has a delusional fan base. Kids don't want to deal with this. And the state of Indiana is overrated when it comes to talent base. Another coach said it's Indiana. It's not even a question whatsoever. Another coach said depends on their support of NIL levels. If Indiana is really going to get around 6 million, I'd go with Indiana. But there is a case to be made that you can recruit more targeted players at a good academic institution like Virginia. This coach said, I personally would prefer Indiana in this new world. Another coach said, it's a tough call. Indiana has a true basketball brand and amazing fan base, but Virginia's just in the more winnable league right now. Over time, Indiana is still a top basketball job, and the ACC will likely bounce back and get harder. So good stuff on both sides of it. It's 5-3. I mean, I hit up 12. I could get, another 4 responses, and that goes to 9-3 or whatever. But a little bit of a temperature read on that. There definitely is a feeling amongst some in the coaching ranks that Indiana's potential toxicity is a major, major turnoff. And you can just, as you mentioned earlier, GP, you can just live likely a more comfortable life. Like Charlottesville's an amazing college town and a really good spot of the country to live. The ACC is easier to deal with right now. And you're even an interim coach removed from the greatest coach in program history. And speaking of that history, like Virginia was previously really good. It wasn't just like they were only good with one coach ever. That's not the case with UVA hoops. So some interesting feedback overall.
Yeah, I would take Indiana. I understand why somebody else would take Virginia. On the Indiana job, like this is, I don't need to relitigate the Tom Crean era, but this is, I assume, what Matt Painter's talking about. Say whatever you want about Tom Crean, but in his last 6 years at Indiana, he went to 3 Sweet 16s. He won 2 outright Big Ten championships, and you fired him 1 year removed from winning an outright Big Ten championship when his team that missed the NCAA tournament actually was banged up and missing one of its best players. So that's how quick of a trigger they pulled on Tom Crean. Then they pulled a quick trigger on Archie Miller. And honestly, I think it would have been smarter to pull the trigger on Mike Woodson last year as opposed to now. But like, you fired a coach 1 year after he won an outright Big Ten title. That's not a thing that most programs would do. And I thought it was hilarious that I tweeted out the video of Matt Painter. And one of the first complaints I got from an Indiana fan on social media was from somebody, and I think this illustrates the point, whether this person understood it, illustrated the point or not. But this person went on to reply to my tweet and explain to me that Matt Painter doesn't know what he's talking about. And the person's Twitter name was @FireFredGlass. I went and looked it up. This person had created this Twitter account a decade ago. Could have picked anything. Like I picked that Gary Parrish CBS, you picked that Matt Norlander. This person picked @FireFredGlass. He dedicated his Twitter name to firing the athletic director. That's where we're at with Indiana fans. So I think Matt Painter, I know he's your rival coach, didn't take what he was saying as he's trying to keep the Hoosiers down. I thought that was coming from a place of sincerity. Hey, I live here. I've been watching you guys go through one coach after another. Some of it's your fault. Some of it is, maybe a bad hire here or there. So you ain't always helping things. That seemed to be what Matt Painter was saying, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. Hey, transitioning to a different topic, different headline. There was a time where when we were wondering what jobs might open, big jobs, North Carolina was at least theoretically possibly on the list. It appears we now know that's not going to happen because today the school has announced that it has hired Jim Tanner, longtime NBA agent, as its general manager for its men's basketball program. And reportedly, Hubert Davis has also agreed to a contract extension. So does that suggest to you North Carolina is going to try to repackage this and run it back? They're not going to make a coaching change after what is clearly looking like a disappointing season. They're going to hire a general manager and try to help Hubert Davis get this thing right, as opposed to try to replace Hubert Davis to get this thing right.
Yeah, so I do expect Hubert Davis to return, and maybe that will wind up being the right thing given what we are talking about right here and now. Is it appropriate for North Carolina to move off Hubert Davis after 3 seasons? Now, let's not talk out of both sides of our mouth. It was on this show 2 weeks ago, where we were talking about you're the University of North Carolina, and do you look at your situation with your staff and your head coach right now, and do you feel like, as one of the 3 best programs in the sport historically, do you have one of the 10 best coaches? Because shouldn't that be the case if you're the University of North Carolina? If you don't think that's the case, should you move off now to go and try and get that kind of coach? Or do you give that coach a little more room to try and do a little bit more? Hubert Davis is tied right now with John Shire for the second most wins in the first 3 seasons of a head coaching career in the ACC. It's the number 78. Shire is going to set the record. The record is by Bill Guthridge, oh, by the way, who had 80. So maybe the record doesn't mean a ton or whatever. But the point is, until this season, Hubert Davis had experienced winning in that league more than any other coach other than Guthridge. And I understand game inventory can play a part of it. But what also plays a part in it is when you can make the national title game right off the bat immediately. I was told that Davis got he had agreed to rework his deal. I got told that some weeks back. It hasn't really affected my view on the situation. I don't think North Carolina will fire Hubert Davis for, in March for whatever. But, if they were to lose 4 the next 5 and, there's an agreement to, maybe he steps away, it's not unthinkable. That's a very proud fan base. But the move here with the general manager would signal and indicate that's not going to be the case. Whether it winds up being the smart move or if we're back here again in a year, we'll see. I'm up to hear both sides of this, because Hubert Davis got a 1 seed last season, made the Sweet 16. The year before was an epic flameout, and the year before that, he got the job and proceeded to get hot and make the title game and end Coach K's career. It's a fascinating arrangement. Where do you land on with all of this? And Tanner, who has he's a longtime agent, him coming in, maybe it can help the issue, but I remain a bit ambivalent on what the right move is here for Carolina, GP.
I think we could debate for a while what's the right move. I can tell you, I can use context clues and reasonably assume what they're doing here, because it doesn't make any sense to bring in a general manager if you're thinking about making a coaching change. To bring in a general manager now, that would actually hinder your next hiring process. Like, whoever you're trying to hire to replace Hubert Davis, they probably want to bring in their own general manager or be their own general manager. They don't want to inherit somebody. So it makes no sense whatsoever to announce a new general manager on February 25th if you think there's even a chance you're making a coaching change in 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. So Hubert Davis is going to endure whatever comes the rest of the way in year 4, and it appears he'll be back for year 5. Now, whether he should be or not, that's another conversation, because I do think if I were running North Carolina, I would be asking myself questions like, do I have one of the best coaches in the sport? And if I don't, why not? We're North Carolina. We should be able to hire just about anybody. And, I know that there's some data points that suggest Hubert has been awesome at North Carolina, but the fact that we're even talking about this on February 25th of his 4th season suggests that it hasn't been that awesome, or at least consistently awesome in North Carolina. So I could have a compelling conversation and make arguments both ways about what North Carolina should do, but it seems pretty clear to me what they're going to do. They're going to bring in Jim Tanner. They're going to throw NIL money at the situation and try to see if they can, in this offseason, assemble and then develop a roster that competes at the top of the ACC with Duke and anybody else that's up there. And if they don't, then they'll have big questions to answer after year 5. But it does appear that Hubert is going to get a year 5. Before we move on, let me ask you one last thing. How long before every program like North Carolina has a general manager? Like, it's just, you can't even think of a program of this stature that doesn't have somebody with that title.
So when you say, let's just say, how long until, the top 20-ish programs have a GM? 24 months, if not sooner, because these schools are it's going to become the thing that is a necessity. The transfer portal is going to be what it is. In fact, a real quick GP on this note, I was talking with an assistant at the high major level recently, and they were even speculating to me that because the portal window shrunk by 15 days for the upcoming cycle, just everything that goes into who you're losing, who you're getting, who you're evaluating, who you're signing, it becomes a bit, you still got plenty of time, but you're a little bit more pressurized. The window becomes a little bit tighter, and your need for a general manager just to help the staff out with everything there becomes even more pressing. And yeah, to your question, I think most top 20, top 25 level programs will have a general manager, if not this upcoming cycle. The one after that, we may well look a year from now and see schools that are floundering, and maybe, I'm not saying it will happen, but might see like, oh, look at this, 4 of the 5. Well, they still don't have a GM. I'm not saying that's the ultimate key to success, but in the current environment, it certainly helps to have someone that does that. With the, oh, by the way, they have to be good at it. Just because you hire one doesn't mean like wins are they have to know what they're doing. They have to understand the space. And in talking to one source in particular, it feels like Tanner is equipped and ready and eager and wanting to do it, and not cheap either. UNC is really investing across the board, basketball, Belichick football, and all that. So intriguing months ahead, no doubt, for the Tar Heels.
One more segment to go before we get out of here. We'll take a peek at Tuesday night's schedule. We got a triple header on CBS Sports Network. We'll get you ready for that next. It's the Eye on College Basketball podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball podcast, CBS Sports Network. Before we get out of here, let's take a peek at Tuesday night's schedule. We got a triple header on CBS Sports Network. I'll be in studio all night long, 7 o'clock Eastern, VCU at Richmond. VCU coming off of a big win over George Mason that tightened up that A-10 race. 9 o'clock Eastern, TCU at West Virginia. 11 Eastern, we talked about it earlier, Gonzaga at Santa Clara. Just to circle back to what we referenced earlier, massive game for the Zags. They're sitting as a 9 seed in Jerry Palm's projected bracket. And Norlander, this is not simple stuff at Santa Clara.
No, it's not. That's my most anticipated. We got a solid Tuesday. It feels like across the board, maybe a notch down from, we were on an insane run of Tuesday nights GP for the better part of a month. But my most intriguing game of the night, I mean, it's not close. It's Gonzaga at Santa Clara. That's an 11 Eastern tip. I am going to be staying up watching you on the tube there coming from the broadcast center. Intrigued to see how aggressive Gonzaga is there. What else on Tuesday catches your eye?
So across the country, outside of our games on CBS Sports Network, number 2, Duke is at Miami. Number 3, Florida is at Georgia. Number 19, Louisville at Virginia Tech. Number 24, Mississippi State at Alabama. I guess Duke at Miami is interesting, if only because, and we touched on this in Sunday's episode of the Eye on College Basketball podcast. First off, the Cougar Flag Tour. It almost feels like it's a big stadium tour. It's in New York on Saturday, and now we're headed down to Miami for a game, but also because Jay Lucas, the Duke associate head coach, has reportedly been named the front runner to be the next head coach of Miami. So I'm sure that'll get a lot of interest, right?
Maybe, although I don't know. I don't know how packed. You know what? It will be a good test to see how many people Cooper Flag can bring into that building, because Miami obviously is terrible there. I got 2 more games for you outside of the ones you mentioned with bubble implications, because Georgia, you mentioned the Georgia one, but Georgia has Florida on his home floor. Got to win the game. Georgia will not be in the field if that's the case. Baylor at Cincinnati. Baylor's on the road. Keep an eye on that. Cincinnati needs a lot of work to do. And then New Mexico at San Diego State is an 11 Eastern tip. Aztecs, I almost wonder if Mark Few's going to be checking his phone, because Baylor and San Diego State both play tonight, and they're the only 2 notable wins the Zags have on the schedule.
Yeah, no, it's a big night for the Zags, big night around the country. Again, triple header on CBS Sports Network. And after Gonzaga Santa Clara, we'll have a 30-minute edition of Inside College Basketball ready to go. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle. He's a legend. Shouts to Huck and Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching the Eye on College Basketball podcast on CBS Sports Network. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple and Spotify. So do that, and we will talk to you again next week. Same time, same channel. Till then, take care.